Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Birthday Cake for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes and for episode 45 we are chuffed to welcome one of our favourites, Jack Cooper of Modern Nature. Enlisting the talents of a host of contemporaries, Cooper has crafted the sound of modern nature across a number of releases, each one as spellbinding as the next. Taking the name of the band from the diaries of filmmaker Derek Jarman, there's something of the natural world to modern nature, the band creating contemplative pieces that often allow some respite from the day-to-day. Each release up until their latest album even features wildlife on the artwork. In August 2025, Modern Nature put out a wonderful set of new songs in the form of The Heat Warps, out via Tastemakers Bella Union. We caught up with Cooper over Zoom ahead of release to talk about the new record, as well as the late Andrew Weatherall, friction with an audience, playing live with Andrew Savage, and introducing your child to the Beatles. Not literally, mind you, though there are two remaining Beatles, so never say never. If you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform, follow Birthday Cake for Breakfast on all the socials, give us a rating, drop us a comment, gather up the family, tell them all about it, etc. Right, on to Jack Cooper. Enjoy.
Hello.
How you doing, Jack? You okay?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Nice to see you too.
Admiring your background.
Oh, what is it? Which aspect?
Your very I'm a musician, like you could spin round and twinkle a few ivories and yeah,
Yeah.
pick up a guitar.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Guilty.
Where do we find you at this minute?
Like literally, physically.
Yeah, because you've moved out to the countryside, haven't you?
Yeah, we've lived here quite a while now. We've lived here coming on 5 years. We moved kind of at the end of the first year of the COVID pandemic. We moved out of London and we live in a village that's kind of halfway between London and Cambridge. So it's pretty rural, but it's still very connected to London as well. So we're in North Essex. Is basically where we are.
And you said like around that time that you kind of went out there to quotation marks hibernate. Do you think that was kind of a good process in a sense? Because obviously you had the pandemic, but it was nice for you to be able to get out there into countryside and such.
I think it was as much space, honestly. Living in London can get very claustrophobic, and we'd moved to an area called Leytonstone, which is kind of quite far out east, and it didn't really feel like we were particularly connected with London anymore. So we kind of got thinking about like more space, like where could I have like somewhere where I could work from and things like that. And then my partner got pregnant and we had a baby, and so she's 3.5 now, and we're starting to, we all kind of go into London a lot more just generally. So I think over the next few years we'll probably either move back to London or like to Cambridge maybe.
Right, okay. Because some people, once they're out of there, aren't they? And they never return to city
Yeah,
living. Is there still that pull for you both then?
yeah, I think so. I think so. And maybe you're sort of looking for community as well. It's not quite as easy to find in rural areas. Our immediate neighbors are great, and the village where we live is nice, but I think because everything's so crazy in the world, it feels like in a city you're more likely to find like-minded people, I think.
Hmm. On that sense of, like-minded people, that segs quite nicely into what I was going to say next, which is one of the last times we saw you was when you, with your band, played the Carlton Club in Whalley Range.
Yeah,
And I admired that memorable moment where, from on stage, I don't know if you remember what I'm about to say, but you very calmly told a table of people chatting away to shut up or, to get out. But it was,
yeah,
it was very calm. It wasn't like, shouting match or anything like that. And they
yeah,
were, very agreeable and agreed to just leave the room rather than, carry on the conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that Manchester moment and if that was,
I do, and yeah, it's always a difficult one, that, because it is incredibly distracting when you're playing when people are talking, and some venues and some bands can kind of absorb that. But obviously, at that point in our where we were at with the music, it was very quiet and very sort of spacious. And to a certain extent, you have to let things like that go. But I felt there was a guy there who, I don't know whether you remember him. It just felt like he didn't want to be there, and he was kind of not within the same space as everyone else, if you know what I mean. And so, yeah, I mean, I do that a lot, honestly, and it can go wrong. I just think it's so antisocial, not to the band, but just to the people around you. And, you don't have to be there.
Yeah. It made me laugh like when we walked in because we didn't realize it was going to be absolutely chocker with everyone sat around. And there was a guy in front of us and he was just really loudly eating like a bag of Monster Munch.
Yeah.
And like you say, those early songs in the set, it's not really the sort of thing. I mean, no gig really is anywhere you should be scranning some Monster Munch, but
No,
yeah,
no. I think that's a good rule.
never scran Monster Munch, yeah. But
Yeah.
but you've had it go the other way, have you then, in terms of that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
it's just, it really depends on how I handle it. It can just be like, it can feel really awkward. And I think it's as much to do with the mood I'm in or like where my head's at. So, there's been occasions where I've said something and it's felt quite confrontational, and that's kind of on me. But to sort of stick up for myself a little bit, I care about it, and I care that people are able to hear it, able to listen. So
I think it was appreciated as well because like there was a take you could feel the murmurs because like you say
yeah,
it's that sort of appreciation, isn't it? Whereas maybe not everyone's going to pick up on it. As well as that Wally Range show, you were off on the road with Andrew Savage around that period as well.
yeah,
He had like a really great live band when he was doing that stuff, and
yeah.
I think you've been in his live band for a number of years, haven't you? But how was it, getting out there with him on the road with like Dylan, the drummer, and that whole ensemble?
It was great, and it was enlightening, and it highlighted some things for me as well, and in terms of like where I'm at with modern nature, I think, and like the sort of record that I was excited to make again, playing with Andrew, and kind of he's a sort of has a very infectious personality, and that his drive and his work rate is really kind of everything in his life. And so to be around him is, it rubs off on you a little bit. And Andrew's, he's an ambitious person, and he wants to connect with as many people as possible. And I think some of that has kind of rubbed off on me, in the interim and stuff. And just playing like slightly bigger shows with him, similar sort of shows to when I was in Ultimate Painting. So it kind of gave me a bit of a up for it again. But yeah, it was a great band. It was to play to play with anyone who's been in like White Fence is a thrill to me, because it's one of my favorite bands. So like Dylan and Josh have both played with White Fence, and yeah, that was a buzz.
Do you think on the flip side of that, with modern nature, one of the things that does work, as in with the show and Wally Range, is that intimacy that you can feel?
Yeah, I think so. It's a balance, isn't it? And we take a lot of care with the records in terms of making them feel intimate like that. Sonically, I want it to feel like you're right in that room with the four instruments around you, and each one is defined, but you can also hear the interplay between them, the kind of, the discrepancies in like pitch and timing and rhythm and all those things. I want It's important for me that people hear that. So that intimacy is, yeah, it's essential to it, I think.
And around the time you were doing those shows, you had your record No Fixed Point in Space out. And you'd said that that record kind of felt like a culmination of everything you'd been working towards.
Yeah,
But live, you were kind of pulling away from that open-ended approach and you were going towards something different.
yeah.
With that sort of process of thinking, where do we go next? Is that, multiple parts stressful and exciting to think, where are we actually going to go with the output of the band and how we approach things.
Yeah, but it's almost became when we were getting into music and you would read the music press and stuff. Bands would often talk about a new direction. It was all about like the new direction and like getting synths and stuff like that, and trying to switch things up all the time. And it's never really felt like that with modern nature. I never feel like, okay, what next? Where do I go next? It always, something happens and it points the way, and you just have to kind of look out for those things and follow it. And that way it feels like a kind of, more like evolution, and that something's just stuck out, something's made itself a little bit more apparent within the music, and it excites you, so you follow that.
Yeah. I mean, that must be tough as well. Whilst that might not have been, the case so much, what you've said about those cliches, they can become true, can't they? Sometimes, where, because I talk to bands where they say, "Oh yeah, we really feel like it's a step up from the last record," and
Yeah,
part of you thinks, "Well, you're gonna say that," but part of you also thinks, sometimes it can be, can't it, in that sort of respect.
yeah, definitely. It's everyone's process is very different, isn't it? But it's funny, it's funny talking to you today, and because that show that we played at the Carlton Club in Wally Range, there was a few bits in the set where it felt very, oh, like something's changed, because I mean Jeff was playing organ and stuff, but the three of us, I think there were a few bits in that set in particular. It was like, oh, this is kind of exciting. This is an exciting way forward.
I liked just thinking off the fly as well, or on the fly rather. I liked as well that you, at the time, I don't know how conscious this was, but you kind of closed your book of music, and that was
Oh
kind
yeah.
of the end. That was kind of the end of the show, and I really quite liked that. That was
Oh really?
the end of the book, so to speak, and it was like that's it now. I don't know whether
That's
that's a
very dramatic of me, isn't it?
yeah, I don't know whether that's a conscious thing or
No, I don't think so. But
yeah, but
yeah.
it was just like yeah, like a nice magical moment.
Oh,
But
good.
you mentioned like, your current bass player, he was on the organ and stuff. You've kind of mixed it up with the band more for this record and shows last year with Tara Cunningham stepping in for
Yeah,
dual guitar. Do you find it rejuvenating slash exciting, trimming things down slash moving things around a bit?
yeah, definitely. It's yeah, it keeps things fresh, but I think with this lineup in particular, it felt like it just needed to be very direct. And I think the songs that I was writing and the lyrics that I was writing, I wanted it to be, very direct and very to the point, I suppose. And I think just having been brought up on music made by, four people and two guitars, just as like the 90%, 80% of the music I've listened to in my life has been that lineup. So it just felt, if I was going to do something as sort of direct as I could be, that was the medium with which it made sense to work. But it really could change again. I mean, Jeff, I've never thought of Jeff as like the band's saxophone player. He's always just been a member of the band, and it's not necessarily the way he plays saxophone or the way that he plays bass, which attracts me to him as a collaborator. It's just his mind, and how he thinks about music.
It was
The same with
interesting.
Jim as well.
I was just going to say it was interesting, with what you say about, the band that you already work with. You've said elsewhere that it felt like with Tara joining, it felt like you were completing the other side of the square.
Yeah,
It must be quite a magical moment, being able to see things click into place and having worked with previous artists before, like, you and Tara in a dual capacity outside of
yeah,
modern nature. It must be cool getting everyone together and just clicking on the same page.
yeah. I think on No Fixed Point in Space and Island of Noise, I was writing kind of arrangements that created like a framework for spontaneity and interaction and stuff. But when Tara joined, it felt like we could do that just the four of us, that it didn't need anything else. Because the instruments themselves and the sounds, really, it's just like 1% of what makes a record. It's more that the way that they interact. So you'll know that from records that have very basic instrumentation. You don't miss anything if it's good music and it's working together. But yeah, Tara is, when you start playing with someone like that and you see a musician as accomplished as she is, but also as idiosyncratic, or like, I don't know what the word is, individual, I suppose. As if you're a band leader, you want people like that in the band. I think there was just something about the way that we played guitar with each other that kind of mirrored each other in a little bit of a way. And I'm always thinking about the way records sound in terms of the balance and stuff. So to have a guitar on each side of the kind of sound spectrum, and two voices on the other side as well, which a lot of it is, it just gives it like a nice balance. It's something that's quite satisfying to process, if you listen to it.
You've said, on that sort of theme that you were listening to the television demos,
Yeah,
which I'd never listened to before until doing a bit of research for this, and it's so interesting hearing, the germs of those ideas forming, isn't it?
yeah,
And that they've very much got that dual guitar sound as well.
yeah.
Were there any similar touchstones that you were, coming off the back of when you were thinking about this record and your work with Tara?
In terms of two guitars.
In terms of that sort of sound, yeah, and boxing off a record and a symmetry.
Yeah, I think the Beatles, a lot. I'd got really back into the Beatles over the last 9 months or something like that. I hadn't listened to them in a long time, and my daughter really started responding to the Beatles when I play them and stuff. And so it's been kind of our hobby together, getting into the Beatles, and so I think that the way that they work in terms of, like, generally they have two guitars on either side and kind of unison vocals, harmony vocals and stuff. That's always just been that's always been a template in my mind of how a band should sound, really.
How has it been getting her involved with the Beatles and her, clocking onto that as well? That must be so rewarding for you.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very interesting to see what she picks up on as well, because I think, obviously in our culture, in sort of Western culture, you're kind of brought up on nursery rhymes and very simple major scales and things like that. And so, in lots of other cultures, you don't have like children's songs like that. It's just like children listen to music and stuff. And I think we've tried to do that to an extent without like forcing anything on her. Obviously, she hears nursery rhymes and stuff like that as well. But it's been interesting just like playing stuff and like seeing what she's into. Her favorite song is like "If I Fell" off "A Hard Day's Night," which is it's such a beautiful song, but not like one of the ones that you would imagine to like really resonate. But then the other one that like really weirdly she was really into was "Blue Jay Way" off Magical Mystery Tour, which is like, it's kind of a bit of a dirge, and but she loves it.
Already she's going for deep cuts as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there anything that you've like tried her on that she's just been flat out too young for it or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, she hears things being played in the house and stuff, and sometimes she might ask for something else, but no, not really.
As long as it's never you listening to your own demos and she's like,
Yeah,
turn that
yeah,
off.
yeah, for sure.
Quick break in the interview just to give you a heads up about some of our previous episodes. From our first episode to our latest, we featured interviews with the likes of Proto Martyr, The Lovely Eggs, Anna Erhard, Chat Pile, The Future Heads, Public Service Broadcasting, Gang of Four, Joshua Idehen, The Jesus Lizard, and even snooker legend Steve Davis. Treat yourself and go back through the episodes. Be sure to tell all your friends and comrades too. Enjoy! So you did a feature for us once upon a time, and you'd said that spell was probably the closest you'd come to realizing how you think of the music in your head. So the band realizing it rather.
Oh, yeah, did I? Go on.
Have you had anything, in that sort of regard where what's been in your head has been fully realized, or at least, quite well realized by what you've been working on?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's impossible really because what happens in your head is obviously so abstract, and as soon as you start trying to put chords to things, and as soon as you start dealing with the limitations of your own kind of ability and things like that, it changes, and you're never going to get completely close to it. But I think that the song that feels of this record that feels like sonically, and the arrangement feels most satisfying to me is Radio, which is like very slow and kind of languid sounding, and I think that that's the one that I just feel very content with.
Do you ever, I'm imagining from what you've just said, the answer is yes, but do you ever get to a point where the song itself is just completely different to what you'd envisioned, but it's worked out in a good way?
Uh, yeah, sort of. I mean, it definitely it can get away from you, and perhaps some songs that you go into the studio with, you maybe don't have as defined a sort of an idea of what you want it to sound like, and that can get away from you. And those are generally the songs that I listen back to that I feel like dissatisfied with. I think when you're recording, you have to leave elements up to the gods, as it were, in terms of seeing where it goes. And there is a lot of that in our music. But when a song, when I'm not sure what a song should sound like, that's when it can get frustrating. So something like, there's loads. I'd have to listen to them, but I think there's one on Island and Noise that I felt really dissatisfied with. But you just have to let it go, really.
Is that ever something that you do have a war with, or are you quite good at being able to get on with things and move along?
Yeah, I'm good at being able to move along, but it's difficult for me to. I know lots of people say this, but there's certain songs that I've made that it's sort of difficult for me to listen to because it feels like a missed opportunity, if you know what I mean.
Sure. And I guess, in those circumstances, that's why people mix it up so much in a live environment because you can
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
add on and such. But the record itself that you've been working towards, the Heat Warps, is, finally announced. It's the way the year is going, it's already almost out because it's the end of August. It must be a thrill, having something like that on the horizon and it just being almost here.
yeah. It is, and it comes around quick. I know people, and I've probably said in the past that I hate waiting for records to come out because you kind of get your headspace moves on and stuff. But I don't know whether it's getting older or being a parent, but like time goes so quickly, and so it feels like a few weeks ago really since we finished it,
Which
and
must
it's
in itself be mad to deal with, like you say, with the passage of time going so quickly.
yeah, yeah, it is. But there's nothing you can do about that, is there? Yeah,
The actual recording process, I think that was pretty swift as well, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah. We did a couple of days of rehearsals, and then we played two shows. We booked two shows so we would kind of have the opportunity to test the songs out live. And then we went into the studio, and it was kind of over the course of 2 weeks. So we were all together for like 2 weeks, pretty much. And I think we recorded for think we did 3 days and then a day doing vocals, and then a few weeks later we did one more day just doing, you know, some small changes and stuff. So yeah, 5 days, and we record everything. You know, we're all in the same room together, and you know, we're not wearing headphones because we're not recording vocals at the same time. We do that after. But yeah, we're just in a room together. So it almost doesn't feel like you're recording because you're just kind of in the room together, and you play at a volume that, you know, is kind of sympathetic to each other and stuff. And everything bleeds in, you know, and nothing's isolated. So it's the best way of capturing that interaction, really.
You know, working with an all analog studio, which I think was right, wasn't it, in East London?
Yeah.
That very much fits the aesthetic of modern nature as well, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd agree. So, you know, with that sort of thing, is that kind of like it's kind of a no-brainer to just, you know, work in that sort of fashion.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the, you know, the themes that we talk about in modern nature, or you know, the feeling that we're trying to put across is one of, you know, being part of the real world, being part of the natural world, and just being a cog in that wider, you know, expanse and stuff. So it would seem contrary to me to for it to be kind of assembled on a computer. And there's nothing wrong with making records like that, but it's a very different process constructing a record on a screen versus basically playing the music in a room and someone capturing it. It's a completely different process. And you're right. It would seem obtuse to do it any other way if, you know, considering, you know, the sort of idea behind the band, I suppose.
It was moving on to, like, you know, the tracks and stuff. I thought it was interesting what you said of the track totality, of you being in the States and then
Yeah,
gearing up for a solar eclipse. And you said about, you know, that it was, they treated it over there like it was this big thing, like they were prepping for, you know, an American football game or similar.
yeah,
But because you were surrounded by these people, it was kind of, you know, you were all having this connection on this profound level because it was moving these people so much.
yeah.
Number one, that must have been pretty powerful to be a part of, where everyone's on the same page. But similarly, did you have any similar life events, you know, when you're writing this record? Because I suppose, you know, you've got family stuff as well and country life, and that fits in with the overall the theme.
Yeah, the totality thing, the solar eclipse, it was really interesting being in America and seeing that, because they were, you know, they were kind of gearing up for the election, which was obviously in the news and stuff. But then everywhere we went over the course of those few days, people were so excited about this cosmic event, you know, the solar eclipse. And yeah, being America, it was like they were gearing up for the Super Bowl or something. Everyone was having a party or talking about what party they were going to and stuff. But it just seemed very interesting to me to be in a place, you know, and it would be the same in England, where there's a culture now where individuals kind of, because the weight of consciousness is so heavy, you know, there's a culture of looking at life as a game that you have to win. So it's kind of, you go over there and there's this hyper individualism and competitiveness, and society, it's not the same anymore there and stuff. But it was just very profound that people were looking for, like, literally looking for something bigger, and kind of excited about this event that was completely out of their control. And it just felt that there was like a lesson there, you know, that it was kind of highlighting this sort of general malaise that is in Western culture and you know, end game capitalism. And you know, without being too romantic or too much of a space cadet, to see optimistic things like that is really beautiful, and to see people letting themselves be part of something bigger is really beautiful.
Just letting themselves go must be
Yeah,
something as well, given what you've said about the way society is over there.
yeah, yeah.
I say that as if society is different over here. It's,
Yeah, no, it's just the same, really. I think maybe people are a bit more open about this kind of individualism over there, but it's kind of the same here, really.
how do you find, like, I don't know why you were there, but how do you find going to the States now? Because I've not been in a long time, but
I love it. I really love it. And it's sad to see sort of what's happening there and this turmoil within American culture, because I've always had the most amazing time there, and I've met the most interesting and most enlightened, most progressive people, in my life there. There is there is a huge percentage of the population that are wonderful, enlightened people, more than anywhere else, really. But there is also the other side, and it's that split which is, causing so much friction.
I suppose the thing as well, it is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive, and every town is different, very varied.
Yeah. So as well with the record itself, one of the things that you mentioned, in I appreciate press releases aren't always truthful and can, pick from different things people have said, but you've noted that Andrew Weatherall rather was a touchstone because he played Modern Nature on his NTS show
Yeah,
before his passing, and he touched a lot of people, a lot of musicians, and a lot of
yeah,
artists and DJs. How was it having that last minute connection with him? Having him play the record and have some
yeah.
involvement in the story somehow.
I first became aware of him when I was, a teenager, and a friend of mine made me like a cassette mixtape that had like a lot of his remixes on for Primal Scream, and I guess like Happy Mondays, maybe. I can't quite remember. I was always kind of fascinated by him, and this was sort of pre-internet, really, and he was sort of this kind of mythical figure in my head. And when I started doing music, or like trying to get somewhere with it, I met up with I nearly signed like a development deal with Heavenly Records, and I've always been since then. I've always been really good friends with Jeff Barrett, who runs Heavenly and stuff. And I've always, being a little bit late to the party, I've always kind of, that era of like the Heavenly Social, and always just seemed so exciting to me. And I would like get those late night tales compilations and things like that. And Sean Rowley, who used to DJ at Heavenly Social, I had a compilation that he did, and like Weatherall stuff. And it always just seemed like a very kind of interesting, eclectic, kind of romantic time, and to live in London and to be in that kind of scene. So I've always had this idea in my head that the best records are the ones that when you go back to someone's house after the pub or after a club or something, and those kind of late night records that everyone loves, like the Beta Band 3 EPs, and things like that, just like records you want to listen to when you kind of stoned with your friends back at someone's house. And I've always had this kind of image of Andrew Weatherall in that sort of slightly dreamlike place in my mind and stuff. And so when he played us, I was made up. And when he passed away, my friend Jeff at Heavenly said to me, I think it was performance off the Island of Noise record. Jeff said to me, Weatherall would have loved this. And, it meant the world to me, honestly.
Having that sort of connection as well from when you were a youth,
Yeah.
it must be so. fulfilling as
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, and it feeds back into that idea of how music and how art is really a great record is really the culmination of a lot of people's effort, and it's everyone that's made the record, it's everyone at the record label, all those obvious things, but it's all these influences, and they can be non-musicians. But this sounds corny, but it's also the people who your music resonates with, the people that come to your shows and the people that have followed you throughout the years and stuff. All that interaction and all that community feeds back into records, and any work of art and stuff. And with him on this record, it just felt very present for some reason, that I wanted to make a record that would sound good to him late at night, that he might play to his mates. And the sorts of records I'm talking about. Like, we played a show in Ipswich a couple of years ago, and the promoter, we went back to his house after, and he played me this like Tony Joe White record. I don't know whether you've heard him. It's kind of like really laid back kind of country, but that kind of country funk sort of sound, but like really cool, kind of bluesy and stuff. And it was just like the perfect, late night record. There was something about that situation that like fed into this record as well.
I imagine there are so many moments like that, where you go to someone's house in these late night situations where it's just dust, isn't it? It's gone. But it must be
Yeah,
interesting that you've been able to hold on to these moments and it's kind of filtered in.
yeah, and it's been, one of the best things about touring really is meeting like-minded spirits, whether it's like promoters or people you meet at the show, or like people in other bands, or people who you talk to, someone who might come and interview you before the show. And it's important to kind of draw on those interactions, I think.
But you can see why those huge Americana tours where they're on a bus and they're traveling, flying through the States, how they can just stay on the bus and
Yeah, that's never been an option for me. I've always been staying at people's houses and or hotels, but more often than not, someone is back at someone's house.
forever looking for that late night fix of the
Yeah,
albums. Yeah.
yeah.
In a similar approach, you've highlighted that, music and making music and creating things can feel flippant or unnecessary at times
Yeah,
because, there are lots of things going on in the world which rightly deserve focus and attention. But at the same time, you've said that you've had your own worldview defined and influenced by art and artists throughout your life, as we've just discussed, And because of this, there's always reasons to be optimistic, and these things are beneficial in, what they can do and who they can lift up.
yeah.
Bit of a rhetorical question, but, do you think it's of such importance to use these tools so that you can, get into these spaces?
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily have to be forthright about specific opinions. I think it's important that you are, if there's something that is particularly pressing for you. But I think that the harder it gets to make a living out of doing music or running a website or taking photos and things like that, the more those acts and the more that way of life is elevated to a sort of political act in itself, because the harder it gets to do this, the less financial compensation that you get for doing all of these things that contribute to a conversation, I suppose. They're elevated to the point of being political acts in themselves. So just doing it and making things and trying to communicate with people is in itself a really positive thing. But if you can use that platform to just put your worldview across, and for that to resonate with other people, that's really important. I think, I think of the Smiths a lot, and obviously Morrissey is someone who's become, some of his views have obviously become very problematic and abhorrent to a lot of people. But as a band in the 80s, their musical influence was huge. But just the fact that they did the album Meat is Murder, and they were very vocal about vegetarianism and stuff, that in itself has had such a huge effect on our society. So many people growing up who get into the Smiths turn vegetarian, or an aspect of their diet is vegetarianism, and it's kind of astounding to think what influence that has had. So you can influence society, and you can influence people who your music resonates with, not necessarily by being too acute or forthright with your ideas, but it's just giving people a sense that there's like-minded people out there, I suppose.
And going back to you saying about Weatherall and, these tapes that your friend made for you,
Yeah,
just going back to that sort of thing, that's such a special moment, in your formative years, isn't it? To have those sorts of
yeah, yeah,
scenarios and, like you say,
really is.
like-minded individuals, and knowing that you're not the only person who feels in
Yeah,
such a way.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.